I absolutely adore the Batman Arkham series, but one thing I think has been missing from it is the inclusion of some more obscure villains, maybe the more strange or macabre among Batman's rogues gallery. We've gotten a lot of the main ones. We've gotten people like Joker, Riddler, Two-Face, Penguin. Obviously the mainstays are all here, but there's so much more that we could see, especially with the upcoming WB Games Montreal Batman Arkham Origins supposed Court of Owls sequel. So today, I wanted to take some time to dive in and look at 5 villains that I think would be a good fit for the next Batman Arkham game and how they could be incorporated. So before we get started, if you enjoy the video, please definitely leave a like and let's jump into it. The first villain I wanted to talk about actually makes an appearance in Asylum, sort of, but not really. And that's Prometheus. He shows up as a riddle located within the Asylum, and he actually has a character bio in-game, so we know that he exists in the Arkham canon. So let's take a look at his bio. Who is he? Prometheus is described as a dark reflection of Batman. Prometheus was raised by criminals who were gunned down by policemen right in front of him. Dedicating his life to destroying the law, Prometheus traveled the world and trained in the ways of murder. Clad in an armored suit that maximizes his natural skills, he is a master assassin whose physical and mental abilities rival Batman's own. So one of the things I love about Prometheus is that he is this, like they say, reflection of Batman. It's essentially what Batman could have been on the other side of the law. His parents, unlike Batman's, were criminals. He watched the police kill them. So unlike Batman, who watches Joe Chill kill his parents in cold blood, he watches police gun down his parents in what he perceives as cold blood, and he wants revenge. He is sort of a knight of vengeance, just like Batman is. Now, Prometheus is a really interesting character in the comics. He has a house, a crooked house, built in the Ghost Zone. It's sort of his own Batcave. He's also naturally rich. He has his access to his parents' money because his parents had actually established quite an amount of wealth, probably not rivaling the Waynes, but definitely a formidable amount of money during their crime spree. And so then Prometheus, who we don't even know his real name, the actual popular version of this character, went around the world using this money and training, and then avenged his parents' death, killing the police officer who shot them. So then he goes on to actually become a mainstay villain of the Justice League, especially prior to Flashpoint, and a play off of Batman. He's sort of the anti-Batman, sort of what the Wrath has become in the New 52, even though the Wrath really was hyped up and never came back. Unlike Prometheus, he was back a lot. So how could Prometheus actually be incorporated into the game? Well, just like we see with the Mad Hatter in Batman Arkham Knight, this season of infamy, you could essentially do the same sort of thing but have a different spin on it. In Arkham Knight, the Mad Hatter is kidnapping police officers and sort of going almost Riddler style with it, where he has his rhymes and his sirens blaring, and he's kind of trying to get Batman on this specific track. I don't want to get too in depth here because I want you to be able to enjoy it if you haven't played that. But essentially you could have Prometheus going around and actually killing police officers. I know that's a bit of a hot button issue in the real world, but essentially it would fit his character. You have a lot of characters doing things like that, like Professor Pig in Knight, where it's a serial killer. You have the serial killer of Hush in Batman Arkham City. So you could kind of go this direction where he's doing that just with police officers, and you have to track him down over the course of the game through a side mission. The second idea I had actually was a mixture between my idea and the idea of a subscriber comment. So I want to shout this person out because I think they had a really good idea of how to incorporate this villain. And that is a comment from Martin Ponce about Cluemaster, which he described as Cluemaster, who could be the WB answer to the Riddler. So who is the Cluemaster? There's been a couple different versions of him in the past. His name is Arthur Brown. The original version of him was a failed game show host, which is an interesting way to take it. And he sort of developed into a character like the Riddler, where he would come up with these mind games and puzzles. My favorite version, though, of Arthur Brown's Cluemaster is actually from the more obscure animated series, The Batman, not to be confused with the Matt Reeves movie. The Batman was sort of a different spin on Batman the Animated Series, kind of. It was a modernization of that story with a lot of different spins on characters and even inclusions of characters that never made it into the original. In this adaptation, Arthur Brown is still the Cluemaster, but he's not a failed game show host. He is a failed game show contestant who believes that he was cheated. Essentially, Arthur was winning way too many of these game shows in a row, and he was eventually pushed out by the host and the network. And this was his dream. His dream was to be this intelligent game show contestant. I know it's a strange dream, but it was his dream, and he got sort of cheated out of it. That's where his origin started in this version. I think it's a little bit more of a relatable and humanized version of the character, so I think you could definitely go maybe more on that track, but I'm sure WB can make either one work. So how could Cluemaster actually be an answer to the Riddler? Well, for starters, he could work a little bit with other villains around him, other minor villains. Maybe you could tie someone else into his side quest. Even though he is sort of a Riddler knockoff in a lot of ways, he is also much more than that. He can embody what the Riddler can do, essentially, and he's not as interesting as the Riddler in most interpretations, but he can sort of embody that riddle aspect of the Riddler, the mind games aspect, and that's what makes him interesting. Instead of just focusing on something like Riddler trophies, with Cluemaster, they could focus more on the actual mind games. Essentially, they could have riddles and maybe even some puzzles under the Cluemaster guise, and you could go in that direction so that you can still have the detective-y part of Batman without only needing to shove it into the crime scenes, but also without having to jam 400 Riddler trophies into a single game. I feel like I'm digging into the Batman here a little too much, but the third villain that I thought would be interesting to me was this character named Ragdoll. So Ragdoll actually started out as a normal old thief. Eventually he went up against Catwoman and Batman, eventually at the same time. He joined up with the Penguin, then sort of was just beaten easily and taken to jail at the very end. But what makes him interesting is that he is this weird, obscure character from the Batman cartoon series again. He's not someone anyone really ever talks about, and he's an interesting answer to the thieving side of the Batman Rogues Gallery. A lot of the times when this comes up, it just comes back to someone like, I guess, Two-Face or Catwoman, with Catwoman being the much more humanized version of that type of character who actually has an intricate relationship with Batman. Ragdoll's a more obscure one. You could have him doing something like knocking off banks. You could have him going up against Catwoman. Maybe this is the introduction of Catwoman in the Arkham series, because Catwoman was obviously around by Arkham Asylum, but not shown in Arkham Origins. So there is room here to work with someone like Catwoman and Ragdoll either playing off of each other, or with just Ragdoll going up against Batman in a minor side quest. Red Claw is another interesting character that I think could make for a good side quest character. Again, none of these can carry really their own game, in my opinion, unless you have some Oscar writer coming in here and somehow fleshing this character out to insane heights. But Red Claw is a very dangerous assassin or terrorist in the Batman the Animated Series, the original animated series. And she eventually, she goes on to have this really big threat level for something like Batman the Animated Series. The first time she's actually introduced is the Catwoman introduction, and she is actually going into bioterrorism in this first introduction. Her whole thing is she's trying to steal this plague, and eventually she wants to be able to use it to hold the city ransom. Now, I think that she could actually work in pretty much the same way. If you had something like Batman tracking down a missing CDC van of some kind, like, hey, there was this CDC van that was going through Gotham and it got knocked off and the components, the things are gone, where are they? You could have Red Claw come in, maybe have a series of side missions with her and the group of underlings under her, working against maybe the US government or the Gotham City Police Department at the very least, and escalating above that. This could be the introduction of the character, and since it's one that we don't see in any Arkham game, they have the freedom to do whatever they want with her. The final character I have is another one that's been mentioned or shown in several Arkham games, but never shown up. And that's probably the most disappointing character for me to never have seen, which is Scarface and the Ventriloquist. They're pretty much the same character. Scarface had a bio in the original Arkham Asylum, which I'm going to read and show right here. Gotham's Blackgate Penitentiary once had a gallows tree from which 313 criminals with death sentences were hanged. The wood from that tree was whittled by an inmate into the puppet Scarface, and that inmate was murdered by Arnold Wesker, a man who soon fell under Scarface's influence. While most believe that Scarface is simply a tool through which Wesker, as the criminal mastermind the ventriloquist, acts out a dark side to his personality, Wesker himself believes that Scarface is possessed by the souls who died beneath the gallows tree, and the puppet actually motivates him to commit the duo's many crimes. Scarface is such a weird character. He was always one of my favorite Batman villains. He's kind of left open-ended depending on the interpretation, where you don't really know if the puppet is fake. Is the puppet actually alive? Are the souls of the gallows tree victims inside this puppet? Or is it all Arnold? Is it all just this insane guy with something like dissociative identity disorder acting out the dark side of his personality through the puppet? There's so many ways you could incorporate him into the game that I don't even know where to start. You could have him just committing robberies. That's what happens with Scarface a lot of the time. You could have him making plays in the Gotham underworld to try to get up higher into that underbelly of Gotham City, sort of taking over a Black Mask role, except maybe this time it won't just be the Joker is the puppet. And you could do something like that, or you could go more of a low-key level, like maybe this is the first ever appearance of Scarface, just showed up and he's very low level. I'm not really sure which I'd prefer. I would love to see a few different missions with Scarface where he's not just some tool or some prop in an Arkham game, because I always thought he was really underutilized and just a fantastic villain. The Scarface episodes of the original Batman animated series are some of the most chilling and weird episodes in the whole thing, and I highly recommend you watch them if you haven't seen them. So everyone, this was my list of 5 villains that I thought should appear in the upcoming Arkham game. I might end up doing another video like this, I'm not sure. I want to see your response to it. Sometimes I release a video and everybody loves it and it gets a ton of views, and other times I think it's not everybody's cup of tea and maybe it was something I was more interested in. So you'll have to let me know if you enjoyed this, what you thought of it. Maybe you have some ideas of your own. Sometimes you guys have way better ideas than me. So if you have a better idea for how to use any of these characters or other characters that should be used, let me know in the comments. If I make another video on this, I might end up using your comment, so I'm just letting you know. I'd definitely say, hey, this is where I got this from, if I see it. And if I don't end up using any comments or making another video like this, I'm sure I'd give you a favorite anyway. Because a lot of you guys, like I said, you have great ideas. So if you enjoyed this, please leave a like. Please subscribe for more content just like it. And I will be seeing you in the next one. Have a fantastic day. Peace.